Imagine a fictional man named Daniel Mercer. Daniel is 72, a retired city bus driver living outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and on most mornings he still considers himself reasonably active. He walks to the end of his street, drives himself to the grocery store, carries his own bags into the house, and takes pride in doing things without asking for help. But one ordinary Tuesday morning, something happens at his kitchen table that bothers him far more than he expects. Daniel finishes his coffee, pushes his chair backward, places both hands on the table, and uses his arms to pull himself upright. He stands there for a second looking down at the chair. He realizes he does this almost every time now. The exercise that will eventually change the way Daniel thinks about independence is not complicated. It is the sit-to-stand, sometimes called the chair stand. Standing up from a chair and sitting back down with control. Daniel does not know it yet, but that simple movement connects directly to one of the most useful forms of strength after 60. The ability to move your own body through ordinary life. Chair stand testing has been used in research with older adults because repeated chair rises provide useful information about lower body strength and physical function. One well-known study involving community-dwelling adults over 60 found the 30-second chair stand to be a reasonably reliable and valid indicator of lower body strength. That does not mean one chair exercise is more important than your heart, your walking endurance, your balance, or every other form of exercise. The title needs an important qualification. When we talk specifically about the everyday independence required to rise from a bed, toilet, dining chair, couch, or car seat, practicing the movement of standing up has an unusually direct relationship to the task you are trying to preserve. Walking remains important. Balance work remains important. Strengthening the rest of the body remains important. Older adults benefit from a combination of aerobic, muscle strengthening, and balance activity. But Daniel is not thinking about exercise guidelines that Tuesday morning. He is thinking about something much more personal. When did I start needing my hands? He tries standing again, this time, almost to prove something to himself. He crosses his arms over his chest. He leans forward, starts to rise, then drops back into the chair. He laughs at himself at first, but underneath the laugh is a worry many people recognize. If this has become harder, what comes next? The toilet is lower than the kitchen chair. The couch is softer. The passenger seat in his daughter's car is lower still. Daniel has always thought of independence in big terms: driving, paying his bills, living in his own home. What he has never considered is that those big freedoms depend on dozens of small physical abilities. You cannot walk across the grocery store until you can first get out of the car. You cannot answer the front door until you can first rise from the sofa. You can't not enjoy dinner with friends without eventually standing up from the table. Independence is built from transitions, and the transition from sitting to standing is one of the most common. Researchers have found that lower chair stand performance in older adults can be associated with greater need for help in everyday activities such as bathing, dressing, cooking, cleaning, and shopping. A chair test does not diagnose how independent someone is, but it reflects a physical function that matters in daily life. Daniel's first instinct is predictable. He decides he needs to walk more. For the next week, he lengthens his morning route. Instead of turning around at the corner, he walks 2 extra blocks. That is a good decision. Walking supports cardiovascular fitness, endurance, and overall health. But after several days, Daniel notices something confusing. His walking already feels comfortable, yet getting out of the kitchen chair still requires his hands. This is the first discovery in his story. Endurance and strength overlap, but they are not the same thing. You can be able to walk for 20 or 30 minutes and still find a low chair difficult. Standing from a seated position asks your legs and hips to create enough force to lift much of your body weight against gravity. Your trunk has to move into the right position. Your feet have to create a stable base. Then, once you are upright, your balance system has to settle you. The movement looks simple because you have performed it thousands of times. That does not make it physically meaningless. Think about what happens when Daniel stands. His body first has to move forward. If he remains completely upright with his feet too far away, he makes the task unnecessarily difficult. As his torso comes forward, his body weight shifts toward his feet. Then the large muscles around his hips and thighs help straighten his hips and knees. Finally, he reaches standing and stabilizes himself. It is one coordinated chain. That evening, Daniel chooses a sturdy dining chair and pushes it against a wall. He does not begin with 20 repetitions. He begins with 5. And because standing without assistance is too difficult, he uses both hands lightly on the chair. The first repetition feels awkward. On the second, he notices he is rocking backward before launching forward. On the third, he notices he has stopped breathing. By the fifth, His thighs feel as though he has done far more than stand up 5 times. That surprises him. Perhaps it surprises you too. How can 5 repetitions of something you do all day suddenly feel like exercise? The answer is attention and repetition. During ordinary life, you stand once and move on. During deliberate practice, the muscles perform the same demanding task again before they have fully recovered. That repeated demand is what makes a familiar movement become training. Daniel decides he will practice a few repetitions after breakfast. There is an important distinction here. A few comfortable chair stands can be practiced as movement skill more frequently, but a challenging strengthening workout is different. Current guidance for adults 65 and older recommends muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days each week, along with aerobic and balance activity. The National Institute on Aging also advises allowing recovery rather than working the same muscle groups hard on consecutive days. So Daniel does not try to exhaust himself every morning. Some mornings he performs 3 easy repetitions twice a week when he feels rested. He performs a more deliberate set. The goal is not soreness, the goal is capacity. By the second week, he begins noticing something. His arms are still helping, but not as much. He used to press hard through both palms. Now his hands feel more like guides. That is when Daniel makes his first mistake. He decides improvement means removing his hands immediately. He crosses his arms, leans forward, struggles halfway up, drops back, then tries again with more momentum. On the 3rd attempt, he manages to stand. But the movement is messy and his right knee feels uncomfortable. He almost concludes that chair stands are bad for his knees. Instead, he makes the exercise easier. This is one of the most important lessons in Daniel's story. Progression does not mean forcing the hardest version. A higher chair generally makes standing easier. A lower chair makes the task more demanding. Hand support can also reduce the difficulty. If a standard chair is too challenging, using a stable higher surface or appropriate hand assistance can create a version that allows better control. Daniel places a firm, stable cushion on the seat, making sure it cannot slide. Now he can stand using much less help. The movement looks better immediately. There is no violent rocking, no desperate push, no collapse back into the chair. This becomes his new starting point. If you try chair stands yourself, the setup deserves more attention than people usually give it. Choose a stable chair that does not roll. A firm chair is often easier than a soft couch. Placing the chair against a wall can add security. Wear stable footwear and clear anything you could trip over. Sit toward the front portion of the seat. Place your feet around hip-width apart or wherever they feel comfortably stable. Bring them close enough that you can press effectively through the floor. Then allow your upper body to come forward. Daniel uses a simple cue: nose forward, then stand. He does not throw himself forward. He simply shifts enough weight toward his feet that his legs are in a better position to lift him. Then he presses through the floor and rises. Once upright, he pauses. That pause matters to Daniel because early on he often stood and immediately grabbed the table. Now he takes a moment to notice whether he actually feels stable. Then he reverses the movement. Hips move slightly backward, knees bend. He lowers himself toward the chair. And this is where his next discovery happens. For years, Daniel has not really been sitting down. He has been falling the last few inches. The chair catches him. During practice, he tries something different. He lowers himself slowly enough to touch the seat rather than drop onto it. Suddenly, the exercise becomes harder. That controlled descent asks the muscles to manage his body weight on the way down. The same basic sit-to-stand movement is commonly used in assessments and training because it reflects functional lower body capacity, and research has found sit-to-stand interventions can improve sit-to-stand performance in older adults. Although the evidence varies and should not be interpreted as proof that one exercise solves every mobility problem, Daniel begins treating the downward phase as seriously as the upward phase. Stand with control, pause, sit with control. A month passes. One Saturday, his daughter, Emily, visits with Daniel's 2 grandchildren. They go to a neighborhood diner where the booths have deep, soft seats. 6 weeks earlier, Daniel would have noticed that immediately. He would have slid toward the edge of the booth before standing. He might have planted one hand on the table and the other on the seat. This time he finishes lunch, moves toward the edge, places his feet beneath him, and stands. He does not think about it until he is already walking toward the door. That evening he remembers. The movement did not feel easier because the restaurant bought new furniture. Something in Daniel changed. This is the kind of progress that matters after 60. Not looking younger, not proving anything, not winning a contest. Needing less attention for something that had started demanding more of it. But Daniel is still not finished learning. A few days later, he watches an online fitness video showing someone doing rapid chair stands as quickly as possible. Daniel thinks faster must be better. He tries it. After several quick repetitions, his form becomes sloppy. His knees drift inward, his breathing becomes strained, and he nearly loses balance when he reaches the top. He stops. This gives him another important lesson. Harder is not automatically more useful. Speed, resistance, seat height, repetitions, and reduced hand support are all ways to increase difficulty. But progression only helps when your body is prepared for it. For Daniel, control remains the priority. Later, once standing feels comfortable, he begins rising with a little more intention. Not explosively, not recklessly, just confidently. This matters because aging affects not only maximum strength but also the ability to produce force effectively during real movements. Standing from a chair, climbing a stair, or recovering from a small loss of balance all depend on generating useful force. Chair stand tests are widely used precisely because the task combines several elements of physical function into something familiar and measurable. Now ask yourself a question Daniel eventually asks himself. When you stand from your usual chair, what are your hands doing? There is no pass or fail here. Perhaps you stand without using them. Perhaps you use fingertips. Perhaps you push firmly through both arms. Perhaps you avoid chairs without armrests entirely. That observation is not a diagnosis, it is information. Daniel starts noticing his own movement throughout the day. The kitchen chair is easy now. His recliner is harder because it is lower and softer. The toilet is somewhere in between. The passenger seat of his daughter's car remains challenging because he has to rotate before standing. Instead of seeing those differences as evidence that his body is unpredictable, he begins understanding them as variations of the same physical demand. Chair height matters, cervini firmness matters, foot position matters, fatigue matters, joint comfort matters, even confidence matters. The same person can look strong in one chair and struggle in another. That is why comparing your repetition number with somebody else's number is often less useful than watching your own progress under similar conditions. Can you use less hand support than a month ago? Can you lower yourself with more control? Can you stand without rocking repeatedly? Do you feel steadier once you are upright? Does an ordinary chair require less concentration? For many people, those changes tell a more meaningful story than chasing an arbitrary number. At this point, Daniel becomes enthusiastic. Perhaps too enthusiastic. He decides that because chair stands are helping, he can replace everything else with them. He skips his walks for several rainy mornings and tells himself the chair exercise covers what he needs. This is the setback that changes his understanding again. After a couple of weeks, his chair stands are still improving, but his longer walks feel slightly less comfortable. That reminds him of something important. There is no one exercise for every part of health. The chair stand has unusual value because of how directly it practices standing up and lower body function, but it does not replace aerobic endurance. It does not train every major muscle group. It is not a complete balance program. Older adults are advised to combine aerobic, muscle strengthening, and balance activities because each contributes something different. Physical activity can help maintain the ability to perform daily tasks and support independent living. So Daniel returns to walking. He treats the two activities as partners rather than competitors. Walking helps him cover distance. Chair stands help him get to his feet before the walk begins. That is a better interpretation of the title. If the question is, what one daily movement deserves special attention because independence repeatedly depends on it, the sit to stand belongs near the top of the list. If the question is, what single exercise should replace all other exercise after 60, there is no responsible answer. Your body needs variety. Daniel's routine remains simple. On most days he walks. A couple of times each week he performs chair stands as actual strength work. On other days he may practice a few easy repetitions without pushing near fatigue. He gradually adds other strength exercises as well. And because he now pays attention to balance, he keeps the chair nearby whenever a movement makes him uncertain. The National Institute on Aging specifically includes practicing standing from a sitting position among activities that can support strength and balance, while emphasizing safety, stable support, and choosing movements appropriate to the individual. There are situations where Daniel's home experiment would not be enough. Suppose standing suddenly became much harder on one side. Suppose he developed new weakness, significant dizziness, chest discomfort, unusual shortness of breath, repeated falls, or severe joint pain. Those changes would not be something to explain away as just aging or fix by adding more repetitions. Similarly, someone recovering from surgery, dealing with major balance problems, or living with a condition that changes safe exercise may benefit from guidance from a physician or physical therapist before progressing the movement. Mayo Clinic likewise recommends discussing exercise with a healthcare professional when chronic conditions or safety concerns make starting a strength program uncertain. Daniel learns this distinction. Exercise is useful. Judgment is useful too. By the third month, He no longer needs the cushion on his dining chair. He still keeps it nearby. That may sound strange, but Daniel likes what it represents. It reminds him that there was a period when he needed the higher seat, and that using it allowed him to practice successfully instead of giving up. There was no shame in the easier version. The easier version was the bridge to the harder one. Now Daniel works from the regular chair. His first progression is simple. Less hand support. His second is slower lowering. Later he adds another small set after resting. He does not rush toward weights because body weight still challenges him enough. Someone stronger may eventually need more resistance to continue progressing. That could mean an appropriate weighted variation or a broader resistance training program, depending on health, experience, and guidance. The important idea is that the exercise changes as the person changes. A 70-year-old who already lifts weights may find ordinary chair stands far too easy to count as meaningful strengthening. An 85-year-old who needs both hands and a high seat may find 3 repetitions challenging. Both can be working on the same functional pattern. The dose is different because the person is different. That is something Daniel wishes he had understood earlier. He had spent years thinking exercise came in only 2 categories. Either you were fit enough to do it properly, or you were not. Now he understands progression. You start with the version you can control, you repeat it, you adapt. Then the old version gradually becomes too easy, and you earn the next one. That is how training is supposed to work, not through humiliation, through adaptation. One afternoon, Daniel is helping his granddaughter assemble a puzzle on the living room floor. When they finish, he looks at the couch beside him and remembers that getting up from the floor has become difficult too. A chair stand does not directly train every part of getting up from the floor, so Daniel uses the couch for support and rises carefully. But something is different. His legs feel more dependable once he reaches the crouched position. That moment expands the meaning of what he has been practicing. Strength is useful because life does not always happen at chair height. Stairs ask for it, curbs ask for it, slopes ask for it. Carrying groceries asks for it. Getting yourself upright after kneeling in the garden asks for it. The chair stand is not the entire answer, but it can become an accessible doorway into understanding that lower body strength is not cosmetic, it is functional reserve. Think of functional reserve as the gap between what your body can do and what your day demands. If rising from a chair requires nearly all the strength your legs can produce, every repetition feels difficult. If your legs become stronger, the exact same chair requires a smaller portion of your available capacity. The chair did not become easier. You created more reserve, and that reserve can make ordinary life feel less demanding. This may be one reason strength training has such practical value as people age. Mayo Clinic notes that strength training can support physical function, balance, everyday activities, and independence. Daniel eventually stops counting every chair stand he performs during the day. He counts only his intentional exercise repetitions. The rest simply become life again. That is his real transformation. At the beginning, every difficult chair reminded him of decline. 3 months later, the chair has become a reminder that useful abilities can be practiced. He has not reversed aging. He has not become invulnerable. His knees still feel stiff some mornings. He still takes the handrail on steep stairs. He still gets tired after a long day. But the story he tells himself about those things has changed. A limitation is no longer automatically a destination. Sometimes it is a starting point. If you want to use Daniel's experience as a practical guide, keep it very simple. First, notice how you currently stand from a sturdy chair. Do not judge it. Observe it. Second, choose a version that feels controlled. Use your hands if needed. Use a higher stable seat if needed. The exercise only helps if you can practice it safely. Third, think about both halves of the repetition. Stand smoothly, pause until you feel steady, then lower yourself instead of dropping. Fourth, progress one thing at a time. Less hand support, a slower descent, a slightly lower seat, more repetitions, or eventually appropriate resistance can all increase demand. You do not need to change everything at once. And fifth, keep the chair stand in perspective. Continue walking or doing other aerobic activity that suits you. Strengthen other muscle groups. Include balance work. The goal is not to become excellent at one exercise. The goal is to remain capable across the movements your life requires. Current U.S. Guidance for adults 65 and older recommends at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, at least 2 days of muscle strengthening activity, and balance activities. People who cannot meet those amounts can still benefit from being active according to their abilities and conditions. So tomorrow morning, when you stand from the breakfast table, notice what happens. Where are your feet? Do you rock forward several times? Do you press hard through your arms? Can you control the way back down? Do you feel steady once you are standing? The answer is not a grade. It is your starting information. Daniel's story is fictional, but the movement is real. The research around chair rise function is real. And the reason it matters is very ordinary. So much of independent life begins with getting yourself onto your feet. That may be what makes the sit-to-stand easy to underestimate. It does not look impressive. There is no machine, no special equipment, no complicated sequence to memorize, just a chair, your body, and a movement you have performed since childhood. But after 60, the ordinary movements often deserve the most respect because those are the movements life keeps asking you to perform. Get up, walk, sit, stand again. Go outside, get into the car, come home, rise from the table, answer the door, continue with your day. That is the independence Daniel was afraid of losing when he first looked down at his hands pressing against the kitchen table. Months later, he still uses those hands when he needs them. That is another lesson worth keeping. Independence does not mean refusing support. It means preserving as many useful choices as possible. Some days the choice is standing without assistance. Some days it is using the armrest wisely. Some days it is choosing the elevator instead of the stairs, and some days it is asking a professional for help because your body is telling you something has changed. Strength gives you choices, balance gives you choices, endurance gives you choices. And regularly practicing the movement of standing from a chair can help protect one of the most basic choices of all, the ability to get up and move toward whatever comes next. If staying strong and independent after 60 is the kind of practical health information you want more of, subscribe so you can join me for the next conversation. And I would like to leave you with one question. When you get out of your usual chair today, what do you notice first? Your legs doing the work, your hands helping, or the movement happening so easily that you barely notice it? Whatever your answer is, begin there. No embarrassment, no competition, no need to prove anything. Just useful information about the body you have today and one simple opportunity to keep working with it. Daniel began with a cushion, 2 hands, and 5 imperfect repetitions. The meaningful part was not that he eventually stopped needing the cushion. The meaningful part was that he stopped treating difficulty as a reason to stop trying. A chair became practice, practice became confidence, and confidence returned one ordinary moment at a time. That is what functional strength is ultimately for, not the exercise itself, the life waiting after you stand up.